This video is brought to you by Nebula. If you just glanced at the headlines, you'd probably assume that the rebels had captured all of Syria. Assad has been ousted, all the big cities have fallen into rebel hands, and the rebels' de facto leader, Abu Muhammad al-Jalani, is doing triumphant photo ops in Damascus. However, while it's true that the rebels now control most of Syria's population, the rebels only control a bit over half of its territory, with most of the territory to the east of the Euphrates River still controlled by the Kurds. So in this video, we're going to take a look at the current division of power in Syria, the de facto Kurdish state in the northeast, and whether Syria could actually split into two countries. Before we start, if you haven't already, please consider subscribing and ringing the bell to stay in the loop and be notified when we release new videos. So, to understand this video, you need to know a bit about Syria's geography. While Syria is a pretty large country in terms of territory, roughly the same size as Great Britain, it's quite sparsely populated, with a population of just over 20 million people. As you can see by looking at a map of Syria's population density, most Syrians live along the western coast. This is where the rebel offensive took place. It started in the northwestern city of Aleppo and went down towards the southwestern city of Damascus, Syria's capital. Most of the remaining population live either along the Euphrates, which is where cities like Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor are situated, or in the northeast along the Khabur River, which is basically a tributary to the Euphrates. The main cities here are Al-Hasaka and Qamishli, which sits on the Syria-Turkey border. While Syria's Sunni majority are relatively evenly spread throughout the country, Syria's minorities tend to be clustered in certain areas. The Alawites, for instance, which are the ethno-religious group that the Assads came from, are mostly concentrated in the coastal areas to the west of the Ansariya Mountains, around the port cities of Tartus and Latakia. The Druze are mostly concentrated in the south, around the Syria-Jordan border, and the Kurds, who account for about 10% of the population, are mostly concentrated in the north. The Kurds in Syria and elsewhere have always wanted more political autonomy. So, when the war broke out after the Arab Spring, they took their chance and quickly announced the creation of a new, independent state in Syria's northeast, to the east of the Euphrates River. This state was technically named the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria, but is more commonly known as Rojava. Rojava isn't a Kurdish state per se, and it's not even clear if Kurds constitute an outright majority in the territory, but it has pretty Kurdish vibes, both because its military wing, the Syrian Democratic Forces or SDF, is mostly led by Kurdish forces, and because the main political group in the region, the Democratic Union Party, is a Kurdish outfit. While Rojava has operated as a de facto independent state since about 2012, it hasn't been recognised by any other government or institution apart from the Catalan Parliament in 2021. Importantly though, the main political groups in Rojava insist they don't want to be independent. Rather, they want Rojava to be an autonomous region within federal Syria, perhaps like the Kurdistan region in Iraq. Anyway, Rojava's borders gradually expanded over the course of the war, in large part because the US allied with the SDF to push ISIS out of central Syria in 2017, and the SDF claimed this new territory for Rojava. The SDF did lose some territory in 2019, when Turkey decided it needed to create a buffer zone between Rojava and Turkey in northern Syria. But for the past few years, the SDF have basically controlled all Syrian territory to the east of the Euphrates, plus a couple of cities to the west of it, including most notably Manbij and Deir ez-Zor. Anyway, before Assad's fall, no one was really talking about granting Rojava independence, both because Syria was divided into at least 4 mini-states, so redrawing its borders would have been chaotic, and because there was a sense that Assad could slowly but surely retake the country. However, with Assad gone and the rebels, led by HTS, apparently in control of the rest of Syria, what happens to Rojava is now very much an open question. As we see it, there are basically 3 possible outcomes here. The first is that the new rebel government tries to take over Rojava, unifying Syria by force. This is what Turkish President Recep Erdogan, the rebels' main international backer, will be pushing for. And since Assad's fall, Turkish proxies, namely the Syrian National Army, have already staged an unsuccessful offensive on SDF positions in Manbij, which has ended with a US-mediated ceasefire. For context, Erdogan really doesn't like the idea of an independent Kurdish state on its borders, both because it might stoke Kurdish separatist sentiment inside Turkey, which has been a long-standing point of tension in Turkish politics, and because it could act as a base for Kurdish terror groups operating inside Turkey. While Erdogan wanted Assad gone, squashing the Kurds was probably the main reason Erdogan supported the rebels in the first place, and he's already been lobbying the EU against considering Rojava's independence. Nonetheless, even if this is what Erdogan wants, an actual offensive on Rojava feels unlikely, both because it would undermine all of HTS's recent talks about protecting minority rights and probably restart Syria's civil war. The second, and perhaps the ideal outcome, would be that the new HTS-led government agree to a federal structure for Syria that grants Rojava sufficient autonomy so that it can be peacefully folded back into the rest of Syria. This feels possible at the moment, given how much HTS are talking about protecting the rights of ordinary Kurds, and the fact that, as the most recent SNA offensive demonstrated, it's not even clear that the rebels would be able to take Rojava. The third outcome, however, is that the new rebel government and Rojava can't agree on an acceptable federal structure, but the rebels accept that they can't take Rojava by force, and Rojava goes for independence. This wouldn't be totally surprising. While HTS are currently talking a good game about protecting minorities, they're still committed to Islamic law, which isn't obviously compatible with Rojava's democratic, secular constitution. Whether or not Rojava can become an actual state will depend largely on the international community, and whether other countries recognise its statehood. As a final thing, a lot here depends on Trump. There's an assumption that Trump will pull out the 900 or so remaining US troops in Syria, who have acted as a sort of security guarantee for the Kurds. This would leave the Kurds somewhat vulnerable, especially if they declared independence in Rojava. However, while Trump did try to do this in his first term, it didn't actually happen in the end. And when Turkey tried to attack the Kurds afterwards, Trump imposed massive sanctions on Turkey and forced Erdogan into a ceasefire. If Trump can again deter Turkey from taking direct action against the Kurds, Rojava's prospects will look a bit rosier. As you've probably noticed, the news cycle is particularly fast right now, with coups, elections and governmental gossip happening all over the world. In fact, with Trump heading into the White House, that chaos is only likely to get worse. If you're feeling a little lost and even a little depressed, then you might want to check out our series WTF USA, where we explain everything that's happened across the pond in the land of the free. Because while the election might be over, the number of WTF moments only looks likely to increase. Unlike some of our other more serious videos, the tone of WTF USA is more light-hearted and takes something of an irreverent look at what's going on. Regular viewers will be pleased to hear that the series has been extended due to overwhelmingly popular demand over on Nebula.
If these trends continue, hey!
Now, if you didn't know, Nebula is an independent creator-owned streaming platform that specialises in thoughtful content. Over there you can find creators like Wendover Productions, Real Life Law and Legal Eagle, with many of them releasing their very own original series on the platform. We're super proud of WTF USA, and we hope that with your support we'll be able to make other interesting, weird and entertaining series with Nebula in the future. So signing up genuinely helps TLDR to grow and expand. You can also watch every normal TLDR video on Nebula ad-free, and in some instances before they land on YouTube. If you're not a member already, then click our link in the description to get 40% off. That's just $30 a year or $2.50 a month. We really hope you check out the series, and as always, thanks for your support.